This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live first Mondays of every month. My name is Andre. I'm with USA EBN. I'm joined first Mondays by Nancy Leader from Zeta Talk. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning. I have such a fun show this morning. Going to talk about early man, the family of man, and all the different races of man. Where did they come from? They don't seem to have come out of Africa. It's genetic engineering, in the opinion of the Zetas. Before we get too far, let me read our disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change. Rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion, so bear that in mind. We have more information on this subject at zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Breaking news on April 23rd, the U.S. Navy has changed UFO reporting guidelines. They will no longer be considered unidentified flying objects, but be called unexplained aerial phenomenon. According to Navy insiders, this will make a huge impact. But why? In the opinion of the Zetas, there are so many rules that enforce punishment on anyone reporting a UFO that the truth is suppressed. This terminology change bypasses that. Today's show is another case in point. Was man genetically engineered? In the opinion of the Zetas, without question. Here are the facts. You decide. Yet another discovery of early man bones in Luzon in the Philippines have anthropologists once again scratching their heads. Where anthropologists agree that white, black, and Asian people are separate races, they are unsure what to do with the Australian Aboriginal or the brown-skinned residents of India and Arabia. The theory that all races emerged from Africa is based on a common ancestor, the mitochondrial Eve, but the out-of-Africa theory stumbles on several fronts. For one, how did white man emerge? Bathing in bleach? For another, the heavy lids of Chinaman are nowhere in evidence in Africa. But this ignores a more logical explanation, that all of mankind was genetically engineered from the same gene pool using different base apes. In the opinion of the Zetas, the family of man were 6, one of whom, Angola man, did not make it. Quoting Zeta Talk, Angola man was not black at all, but pale to the point of being bluish. Angola man initially allowed an attacker to overtake him while making neither a move to escape or to defend himself. He was eaten regularly until gone. Indonesia man was short and stocky with a rounded belly. Egypt man was slight and slid from confrontation, a factor of his hominoid genetics, as well as the rude ape, which took to the trees to escape and confronted, only when escape was not possible. White man evolved in the deserts of Africa and migrated across the Mediterranean, which in those days was not the water barrier it is today. The rude ape for white man defended itself by a loud bluster, shrieking and hopping up and down. The particular hominid stock forming black man emerged from a portion of the family of man that relied on physical skills and social harmony. The hominoid stock to build Chinaman was from those least likely to be impulsive, where deliberation brought forth rewards, and thus had been selected for survival during evolution. End of the quote. The mitochondrial Eve theory does not consider that the common mitochondria might have been in the test tubes used by the genetic engineers, who, in the opinion of the Zetas, had a hand in the development of all the races of man from various base apes. Quoting Wikipedia, in human genetics, mitochondrial Eve is the matrilineal most recent common ancestors, MRCA, in a direct, unbroken matrilineal line of all currently living humans, who is estimated to have lived approximately 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. End of the quote. The American Indian is assumed to be from Asia due to the high cheekbones they share. There was indeed a land bridge across the Bering Straits in the past, but in the opinion of the Zetas, the base hominoid was a transplant. Quoting Zeta Talk, the American Indian bears the marks of shared genetics with Asians that crossed the land bridge to Alaska, but the root race was much older and unique to the Americas. Unlike the 6 races of man who were formed by genetic engineering and ape of Earth, the American Indian was a transplanted hominoid who arrived far earlier. End of the quote. In 2003, bones of Hobbit man were discovered in Indonesia. This appeared to be an entirely new race of man, though some anthropologists clung to the out-of-Africa theory. This was clearly the Indonesia man described by the Zetas 2 decades ago. Quoting the Sun, Flores man hobbits found in Indonesia were not direct relatives of modern humans. The ancient hobbits, who would have stood 3.5 foot tall, were found at Liang Biao of the island of Florence in 2003. Experts initially believed the Homo florensis, or Florence man, were just a shrunken variety of early humans, but a study by Australia National University found the race were most likely a different species altogether. End of the quote. In the opinion of the Zetas, Hobbit man is what they called Indonesia man, one of the 6 races of man described by the Zetas at the start of the Zeta Talk saga in 1995. Quoting Zeta Talk again, Indonesia man was short and stocky with a rounded belly. He had a dominant forehead which protruded out over his eye sockets, giving him the natural equivalent of shades. He was not swift, but moved in a ponderous manner, and thus his demise. He could not run for safety or rescue others quickly, and his lack of agility and rounded shape prevented him from taking to the trees or cliffs for safety. End of the quote. In the opinion of the Zetas, Hobbit man became the Aboriginals of Australia with a rounded belly and protruding forehead. Quoting Zeta Talk again, the Australia Aborigines also can point to Indonesia man for a large portion of their genetic heritage, having a combination of Gypsy man and Indonesia man with the addition of some black man genes due to the highly promiscuous black man who traveled with a small band to that part of the world. End of the quote. Gypsy man was also recently discovered by anthropologists in a cave in South Africa in 2013. This spot in eastern Africa is where India would have touched when Pangaea was whole. Pangaea allowed migration to India in the opinion of the Zetas. Then Gypsy man became dominant and flourished in India. Quoting CNN, when an amateur caver and university geologist arrived at Lee Berger's house one night in late 2013 with a fragment of a fossil jawbone in hand, they broke out the beers and called National Geographic. It would shake up our understanding of the progress of human evolution and even pose new questions about our identity. End of the quote. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, who is this early man so slender, a tree climber and long-distance walker? Does this not sound like our 1995 description of Gypsy man, one of the 6 versions of early man genetically engineered for Earth? We stated that Gypsy man was slight and took to the trees to avoid confrontation. H. Nalided is described as having hands that showed climbing capabilities. How did he get from South Africa to India? Look at the map of Pangaea. India was snugged up against South Africa, and H. Nalidid was a walker. Why was he found in a cave? He was non-confrontational, and to evade large predators at night, he hid in a cave with a tight opening. End of the quote from Zeta Talk. In 2014, a mummified and entirely frozen Homo habilis was found in the Himalayas. How could a version of early man, assumed to have only lived in Africa, be found in a high cave in the Himalayas? Quoting messagetoeagle.com. During an expedition to the Himalaya mountains, a group of Swedish and Norwegian climbers made a startling discovery. Inside one of the caverns that seemed to have only recently surfaced after a series of violent avalanches in the region, they found a frozen body of a hominoid from the Paleolithic era. Primary analysis of the skeleton reveals the bones belong to an adult male Homo habilis, which is believed to have lived approximately 2.33 to 1.44 million years ago. This opens a whole new interpretation of genetically accepted views on the colonization of the planet by the human species. According to widely accepted theories on the subject, Homo habilis isn't normally believed to have traveled this far from Africa and lived in such hostile climates. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, the Himalayas have been driven high by the periodic crustal shifts caused by the passage of the rogue planet Nibiru, aka Planet X. In addition to the cold that comes from increased elevation, there is climate change caused by a crustal shift to a colder region. Such mountain building can block mountain caves and later reopen them. The issue here is not why the Himalayas would have caves that contain evidence of life form from warmer climes or lower elevations, but that Homo habilis was found outside of Africa, countering the ongoing theory that this version of early man was only in residence in Africa. Speculation on mankind's origins are so wrong as to be almost comical, based on spotty data and full of denial on the absolute evidence of genetic engineering done by aliens. Early man roamed to Australia due to land bridges present in the past and throughout China and Russia. End of the quote. Once again, bones of early man have been discovered where, per human anthropologists, they should not be. This 2019 discovery proves once again that the Sunda plate is pushed down during every Nibiru passage, that early man was genetically engineered from the same gene pool, and that early man did not just emerge from Africa. Quoting National Geographic, the small-boned hominoid named Homo luzonis lived on the island of Luzon at least 50,000 to 67,000 years ago. Luzon seemed especially difficult for ancient hominoids to reach, as it had never been connected to the mainland by land bridges. End of the quote. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, as we stated when Homo habilis was discovered in the Himalayas, mankind is wrong about the evolution of early man stemming from Africa and Africa alone. As with the flat earth theory, pesky facts keep disrupting their theory. Mankind's scientists also refuse to acknowledge the genetic engineering done on early man by benign aliens. Homo luzonis shows many traits of other versions of mankind, as they all shared the gene pool that engineers were using. Of course, there were land bridges to what is now the Philippine Islands, as the Sunda plate has regularly been pulled down during prior passages of Nibiru, sinking the land passages in the region. Nibiru is another pesky fact not admitted. End of the quote. Neanderthal man's history and legacy demonstrate that man has been genetically engineered. Man is presumed to have evolved from apes, but why then do some people have Rh-negative antibodies, lacking the rhesus factor common to all apes? Analysis of the DNA taken from Neanderthal bones found in caves in Europe show that the human blood factors A, B, and Rh positive are utterly lacking in the Neanderthal. Neanderthal man had blood group O exclusively. The range of Neanderthal who interbred with other versions of early man has affected the genetics of humans still living in those regions. The Basque people in Europe have the highest percentage of blood group O, 55%, and the highest percentage of Rh negative blood, 33%, in the world. And the Neanderthal blood type certainly disproves the out of Africa theory. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, archaeologists discover bones such as those of Neanderthal man and wonder what became of him. Did he die out? Did he evolve? It seems he rather abruptly disappeared, and such a strapping fellow he was. Neanderthal man was taken in hand to correct a problem. All of him? Yes. This was effected by making him sterile, a simple snip to the male where he roamed free, and genetically engineering those taken into the lab. So what were Neanderthal's problems, and what did he become? Neanderthal, big brute that he was, had a digestive problem. It is often assumed that he died out because he was stupid or confrontational, but he was none of those, and underwent changes only because he had tummy troubles. He was not living his full life, and some died young due to an inability to digest the foods available, to take advantage of the fauna and flora that were perforce his menu. Coming out of his genetic correction and return to his environs, he looked different, a bit like Cro-Magnon man. End of the quote. In the opinion of the Zetas, the base ape for Chinaman is clearly the orangutan, due to the flanges on the cheekbones and the calm nature of both the orangutan and the Chinese people. The discovery of skulls in 2014 are what is now being called the Red Deer Cave people in southern China show this connection, quoting SMH.com. Enigma man may be a new human species that lived until 11,000 years ago. The study of ancient human remains found in a remote cave in southwest China looks at the idea there may have been another species of human existing alongside our ancestors as recently as 11 to 14,000 years ago. End of the quote. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, in looking at the distinctive flange on the cheekbones of the Red Deer Cave hominoid, one can only see one candidate that would apply as the base ape for Chinaman. The chimp has these flanges but evolved in Africa and is too belligerent. Likewise, the baboon. The gorilla has a placid temperament but does not have the flanges. But look at the orangutan, an ape from Southeast Asia, with distinctive flanges, a broad jaw, intelligence, and a placid nature. End of the quote. Where the Annunaki did not evolve from apes on Earth, they are close enough genetically to man to be able to interbreed and have left their mark among men. Legends, of course, abound, from the gods of Mount Olympus to the tales of Samson and David and Goliath. In the opinion of the Zetas, Samson was Annunaki, as was Goliath. David, of the David and Goliath tale, was a half-breed. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, where Samson is described as being of Hebrew stock, he was not. Anunnaki soldiers were stationed on Earth during the long 3,600-year period between the periodic passages of their home planet, and since they had a normal lifespan as do humans, reproduction had to occur. Anunnaki women were thus stationed with the soldiers to bear young. When one of them died in childbirth, the child was unwanted by the father, as there had been a dispute over paternity, and the babe left to die. Adopted by a Hebrew couple who lied about his origin, he had status in the community but was also highly resented because of his size and strength and fierce determination. Thus he came under attack. The Samson saga is a true story, although descriptions of his strength, in some accounts, are exaggerated. Do the Anunnaki live among us today? Yes, as hybrids in Patagonia, a very secretive tribe. These were documented in 1982 and captured on film in 2011, estimated to be 9 foot 8 inches tall. In the opinion of, and quoting Zeta Talk, where in one photo, the head of a tall man dressed in white appears to be orange. This is due to the color of the hybrid's skin when tanned, not as brown as pure human skin. When this hybrid cluster encountered European explorers, they, like the American Indians, recognized a threat to their existence. Though at first they greeted the explorers and were curious, they withdrew and have kept themselves separate from strictly human society to avoid hostile reactions. End of the quote. And the 7-foot-high Quang people in China show distinctive Annunaki characteristics. A mummy from Tibet in particular has a narrow Annunaki jaw, so that the lower teeth must turn sideways in order to fit. Quoting ancient origins, the coffins were made of wood and shaped like boats, buried upside down, which is similar to the Egyptian concept of the boats to take the pharaohs to the land of the gods. Dating of the area has shown that it goes back to approximately 2000 BC, and they appear to be of Caucasian origin. However, DNA analysis of the bodies have shown that it is a mixture of population from east and west. The males were found to have chromosomes usually found in northern and eastern Europe and DNA found in Siberia. End of the quote. A recent experiment on macaque and rhesus monkeys has raised the specter of the Planet of the Apes. In that movie series, apes were genetically engineered to make a better workforce for mankind and then rebelled to take over the planet. Per the scientists, the recent gene swapping allowed the monkeys to have quicker reaction times and longer short-term memory. Quoting China Daily, in a study published in the Beijing-based National Science Review, researchers from the Kunming Institute of Zoology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, the University of North Carolina in the United States, and other research institutes reported that they had successfully created 11 transgender rhesus monkeys. End of the quote. This was the theme of the Planet of the Apes series. Apes were being used as cheap slave labor until some genetic engineers decided to seek a cure for Alzheimer's. Voila! Super smart apes, and as they say, the rest was history. So heaven forbid that humans are going to try to be as clever and experienced as the benign aliens that engineered mankind out of apes, or who knows where we're going. And Andre, this is the end of my prepared notes. How are we doing on time?
We've got
Good.
about 20 minutes left.
Oh,
yeah.
I fled through it, yes. So much going on these days, one hardly knows what to say. Much of it is political, folks, and we try to stay away from politics,
right.
and religion. We try to avoid they say never talk politics or religion. This is a survival-based, and why is mankind's origins and aliens and all that jazz part of survival? Because we are seeing more and more UFOs. We are seeing more and more photos of little alien guys, that are examined and it's not a doctored photo. And becoming aware of the alien presence is in your future and to your benefit. And the Zetas have said, in the opinion of the Zetas, that what the establishment hopes for is that mankind will be comfortable enough with the alien presence that when we have a pole shift or we have a lot of earthquakes and the end times, hits us big time, and benign aliens walk up to us bearing food or some sort of, bearing perpetual light bulbs or whatever, that we won't say, and have a heart attack, but we'll say, oh, well, we knew they were here anyway, and get cozy and accept the help. So that's one reason. And the other reason is that so many of our news, so much of what we're told in the media is so beyond fake news. It's the establishment or the elite, being in charge and terrified of losing their position. Should we admit that Nibiru is real and is present and is coming at us, and so many people can see it in the sky, and it's causing increasing weather swings and tidal pools and storms, and the sun isn't rising or setting where it should, and and people see it up there in the sky. So should we admit that or what? Oh no, they would demand that we take care of them the way we're planning to take care of ourselves. We have our little bunkers, we have it stocked with food. We're going to run there at the very last minute, and to heck with a common man that pays our glorious spot here on the top of the pile with their taxes. That's how they think, many of them, and especially the ones that are controlling the news, the media. You cannot say Nibiru. When you're going to be an announcer, you have to get this slip of paper that says, under threat of death, do not use words like Planet X or Nibiru or etc. unless approved by your editor, right? That type of thing. And so another thing that can't be mentioned is aliens. You have to be afraid. And there's been a lot of old CIA influence on Hollywood. We have the war of the worlds, where here they come, sucking the blood out of any human that they can scoop up, or ID4, they're here to poison us and bomb us or suck our brains out, and just the worst images. Whatever happened to cute little E.T., and Close Encounters, but no,
right.
the movies that were pushed are all where you have to be. Well, if they could do that, if aliens could drop down and do all that stuff, then what are they waiting for? A population explosion? We've had that going on. Nothing. Obviously there are rules. It's called the Council of Worlds, and there are strict rules about what can be done to humans. They can give psychological counseling, like murmuring in your ear, and the like, but they can't affect your life, touch you, or do anything like that, unless they're granted permission by the council. And the council only grants certain things like protecting Donald Trump from an assassination, let's say, and that type of thing. Healings, which are very rare. And what about the bad guys? Oh, they never get permission to do anything to people. They can only counsel you, and they can only counsel you if you give them an in. If you sit there and say, how can I rob that bank and shoot the guard without the noise waking anybody up? Well, now you're not a good person. And the creatures that are going to come and sit on your shoulder and whisper in your ear are the bad guys. Approximately 5% of the universe evolves to stay immature, selfish, hoarding control freaks, and they are forced eventually to live with each other, but they can go around to the rest of the universe, but they can only give counsel when requested. And 95% of those evolving in the universe are caring. They think of others 50% of the time. They are empathetic, no matter what kind of life form they evolved from, whether it's a slimy toad, or something that looks like an amoeba, or something that looks like a lizard. They all, 95% of them, have souls that evolved to be caring, service to self, empathetic. So the establishment doesn't want you to know that. And why is that? Because they want you to look to them as being the most powerful thing in the universe. Oh, it's our lords and masters. They will save us. They have the finger on the trigger. They know what to do. Or the arrogance of we're the only intelligent species in the universe. So that's why the theme today was all about because of the mitochondrial Eve, which is so obvious that we didn't all evolve, from apes, and the Neanderthal man was a rhesus factor, and other things that show there had to be genetic engineering. Well, what else do you want to talk about, Andre?
Well, I was going to say, though, part of the other reason why this has some impact on your survivability, or your survival tactics, I should say, is that, first of all, as a species and as an evolving throughout these different various types of humanoids. Through all this process over thousands of years, it shows that A, pole shift or crustal pole shift is survivable because the species has continued and evolved, and we're still here through several of these cycles, but also shows that how different genetic traits or tags can follow through the cycle of geography. You know, India, Himalayas, the land bridge, that sort of thing, sort of explains, you know, maybe not the missing link. I think the missing link is inherent here, that, you know, it was engineered, right? I mean, they've been trying to explain the missing link forever, and they've never really done it. So it's like, well, it's kind of implied that we've had some help with the genetic engineering of our species, but also it shows, you know, geography, like how things change very quickly, and how that migration pattern, and that it will show up in the genetic markers as well. Though part of the other reason why this has some impact on your survivability, or your survival tactics, I should say, is that, first of all, as a species and as an evolving throughout these different various types of humanoids, through all this process over thousands of years, it shows that A, pole shift or crustal pole shift is survivable because the species has continued and evolved, and we're still here through several of these cycles, but also shows that how different genetic traits or tags can follow through the cycle of geography. You know, India, Himalayas, the land bridge, that sort of thing, sort of explains, you know, maybe not the missing link. I think the missing link is inherent here, that, you know, it was engineered, right? I mean, they've been trying to explain the missing link forever, and they've never really done it. So it's like, well, it's kind of implied that we've had some help with the genetic engineering of our species, but also it shows, you know, geography, like how things change very quickly, and how that migration pattern, and that it will show up in the genetic markers as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it is fascinating, and that's another issue that the establishment doesn't want you thinking about, is the obvious evidence. You know, that when Nibiru comes through, the plates are ripped apart and repositioned. You know, the idea of ice ages. You know, how come the North Pole was over Wisconsin, and oh no, now it's over France, and oh wait, now it's over eastern Siberia, and why would it move around? You know, and for instance, when it was over Wisconsin, it's the same time period when the globe turns and over Siberia, you have all that warm green grass where the mastodons were munching away. So what did the sun do? Blink out over Wisconsin and then blink back on hot over Siberia? I mean, they're at the same latitude today. So there's all this evidence of coal seams, you know, under the ice of you know, and at the poles, and it's so obvious that there's a crustal shift going on. Well, you can just kind of imagine, if you take a look at the maps of Pangaea, and imagine something jolting enough to go and rip them apart and keep it going. And it's still the process. The Pacific is closing, and the Atlantic is spreading apart. The Sunda Plate is being pushed down, you know, and obviously along the Americas, North and South both, with all those mountains rising, we're being shoved over the Pacific. You know, the process is obvious if you look at geology.
Right.
But they don't want to talk about that, you know. And global warming is another one, you know. In the great fear that you are going to understand what is happening, they had to figure out a way to try to disguise any rising seas. Is the biggie, rising seas, right? Oh, man is creating this. The poles are melting. Well, South Pole is gaining ice, and the Arctic is practically free of ice, But there's so much scientists and so much evidence that if it's not an atmospheric warming, if anything, it's an atmospheric cooling going on, and that the heat rises from down deep on up. They do these permafrost exams, and that's where it's coming from. And does warmer air explain all the volcanic increase? Does the statistics
Or the
of the Russian volcanoes, just goes up exponentially, and earthquakes also has that exponential rise, even though they're desperately trying to keep it from the press, and they try to tweak if it's an earthquake like out in the middle of the ocean or someplace. Oh, don't show that at all. Get it off the database. Get it. And they dumb down the magnitude. If it's a 9, they say it's a 7. If it's, for instance, and you can tell that if you do a careful analysis by the amount of damage and the scope. An earthquake of such will either bring down chimneys and break windows, or it'll crash houses, if it's bigger, for instance. And you can tell by that. And then there's scope. How many miles away from the epicenter? 100 miles, or is it 4,000 miles, or what? And you can tell because it's known how far it's supposed to go, if it's a magnitude what. And so they're lying like crazy, and they're hoping that the common man is dumb and doesn't think and doesn't notice anything and doesn't have that uneasy feeling that so that they can listen. Oh, it's just global warming. Now we're calling it climate change, but it's caused by man. Right. So the governments then institute a carbon footprint tax, which is money in their pocket.
Yeah, funny how money... money
always
goes
to the rich. Always goes to those politicians that are controlling it.
I wanted to ask you. We have about 5 or 6 minutes left in the feed. I wanted to ask you about some recent articles that have been popping up, and I know this. Maybe this is a cycle, and we covered this extensively with the prongs last year. Was that last year? I think so. The prongs of the announcement, the scientific portion of the announcement, Planet 9, etc. There's been some recent articles about Nibiru, and here. I think one of the articles, I don't know if it was a Guardian article, but it was a paraphrase the title. Here comes the Nibiru theories of the end again, and was that covered in some recent Zeta talk, I believe? Okay.
Are you talking about? Probably not. Are you talking about something that happened about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago? And there was 5 websites that talked about that.
Right.
And they all mentioned Gordon James Gianninoto, who is a good friend of mine whom I talk to daily because he's blind, and I read, or essentially blind, and I read him New Zeta Talk, and I find my typos at the same time. This showed up in short order on the Tech Times saying, Doomsday Theory says Planet X will flip Earth's poles, causing apocalypse in the process. It showed up in The Sun, which is a UK, right? Then it showed up in the IB Times, that's the International Business Times. Nibiru fever again, conspiracy theorists claim Planet X will cause unexpected pole shift. And Sputnik News is another one, and The Express, 5 different, And they call him, he got a kick out of, he's either the hilariously grim, doomsday preacher, or, all these things that they called him. But where did this come from? And I said, what? And I'm searching around, and I found, because it seemed to be quoting a Coast to Coast interview he did in 2017. So here I go to Coast to Coast YouTube, and I find their channel says, it's new show,
scrubbed.
New show. And they didn't say it was from 2017. They put it up as a new show, right? And so there it is. This was published on the 24th, and these other websites leapt forth on that day or the next day. Now the point is, what do? Do they hang on coast to coast like that? I kind of doubt that. It looked to me like it was completely orchestrated. right? Somebody got in there and arranged. Either they did it, or they bribed somebody, or it was because Coast to Coast says, well, I don't know. We got a lot of hands doing a lot of things. Who knows how that happened? So they brushed it off as just sort of an accident, right? But
Right.
and then all of these other news sites would have had to have been told, okay, here's the transcript. Now make of it what you will, and go and blather it about. So this is a way to show that there's a lot of push behind the scenes to get the cover-up over Nibiru countered. Now, interestingly enough, a friend of mine who happens to be a poleshiftning.com moderator had a dream right about that same time. And she had me in the shed, coming out of the shed in a track outfit. It was appropriate for a chubby old lady in that it was just sort of loose-fitting, but she said it was a track running outfit. Okay. And I said, yeah, but I don't even run. She said, well, you were kind of hobbling with a gait, and that's me. Okay. So something had happened in the shed, and several people had been knocked out cold, okay? And I was on my way to the house where I was going to go in and give interviews, right? Now, I thought, wow, if that doesn't sound like it, that the cover-up, because Coast to Coast is actually banned from having me on. If George Norrie wants to talk to me, he has to drag in Gordon and say, what do you hear from Nancy these days? Really? That's what goes on? So I know that, and even Gordon, is resisted lately. So
What
if
was
they have
the
me
text?
so blocked
What was
in,
the text of the? What did they talk about that was such? Was it just
all right,
run of the mill? I mean, not run of the mill, but basic.
all right. This is what
Nibiru facts.
yes. The last weeks and how it'll come on suddenly. 49 days is the way he put it. And this, I'll give you a quote because we have a couple of minutes. Claimed that sea levels will rise by 700 feet during the arrival of Nibiru alias Planet X. Conspiracy theories surrounding Nibiru have been ruling the internet for many years, but until now, neither of these doomsday mongers were successful in putting forth a concrete piece of evidence to substantiate the existence of this space body. Several apocalypse believers, it's a reality, will hit the Earth one day, causing massive. Now, Gordon, has joined the party and outlandishly claimed the arrival of Nibiru expected to cause a pole shift on Earth. And he made these remarks by talking live interview Coast to Coast, Then they call him Doomsday Preacher. It'll appear in the solar system and flip Earth's magnetic poles, and it will have a terrible toll, And then they say, also known as Planet X or Wormwood, supposed hell-bent on destroying life on Earth as we know it, doomsday preachers and conspiracy theorists who believe in Nibiru bizarrely claim the planet orbits the sun once every 3,600 years or so. Nibiru is said to be 10 times the size of Earth, and its arrival will herald the start of the apocalypse. Despite assurances from the world's leading scientific authorities and astronomers, many, stupid theorists still peddle the doomsday hoax. An unearthed video clip recorded at the Los Angeles Public Library proves scientists have been battling the Planet X hoax for many years now, and they're probably linking to something where David Morrison of NASA says, no, there is no such thing, So anyway, they that's the gist of it. He talked about the last weeks and how once you get into the last week, the last 49 days or 7.3 weeks, as the Zeta say, you better be in a safe place. And I'm telling you, if for some reason you're hanging around the coast and you would go into 3 days of darkness, that's it.
Yeah,
go up to the hills. Get moving.
You gotta get moving.
Yeah,
well,
because
you should be making your plans now. Just to
yeah,
be
what are
ahead
you
of
gonna
everything.
eat?
Because
what
about
are
the
you going
bridges?
to eat? And I, this whole thing about okay, a bug out bag, all right, we're good. No. You eat that food and whatever, and now what? What about tomorrow?
Do it today.
You plant the seeds you got, and you eat the garden, and you don't know how to save seed or how to treasure it or dry it and save it. And what are you going to do next year? And next week, folks, we're going to have one of these bottom line key survival practices sessions, the best of the best from our last, what has it been, 3 years or 4 years, Andre? And it's going to be just
Millennia.
the things that you need to remember,